Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tesla Universe podcast, where we talk about all things Tesla. I'm your host, Cameron Prince, and tonight we're going to talk about bottles. Now, you may be thinking, what do bottles have to do with Tesla? Well, Tesla used bottles at the Colorado Springs lab, his experimental station he had there in 1899. And the subject of the model we're building is part of the podcast. Now, I've been on the lookout for these bottles for some time, and we're going to step back in the Wayback Machine and look at a video I made in 2017. So that'll introduce you to the search for the bottles. Hey guys, Cameron Prince, Tesla Universe, and today I am in Manitou Springs in Colorado. And the reason I'm here is because I'm on this quest to find Tesla's bottle. If you don't know, Tesla, of course, had an experimental station in Colorado Springs where he made, for the longest time, the world's largest man-made lightning bolts. He was studying wireless power transmission and radio. In his transmitter, his large Tesla coil there, in Colorado Springs, his capacitor bank was made up of saltwater caps. And what you've probably seen the photos. If not, I'll post some of those in the video. But there's a trough, and this trough is full of salt water. In the trough are bottles, and they're connected in a series parallel combination, and there's actually two banks. Tesla used a capacitor on either side of his primary. And those bottles that you see in that big trough, they are Manitou Springs mineral water bottles. And behind me, you can see this is the Manitou Springs Bottling Company for their water. So these bottles that Tesla used were made at this location. Now, it's certainly not the same building as when Tesla was here, but if you look in the background back there, there's some older structures, and those may actually have existed at Tesla's time. I'll insert another good photo of those. But while I was here in Colorado, I wanted to come here. I wanted to see where this bottle came from, and I want to see if I can find one. I mean, surely with the water being the town's namesake, and there's got to be one of these bottles I can at least look at. I was talking to someone the other night about the bottles, and they actually said that these bottles were on the Titanic when it sank. So there's a lot of history with these things, and not just besides Tesla, So I'm going to walk around and check this out. There's a lot of no trespassing signs, but maybe I can get in there and get a photo. And then I'm going to go downtown and try to look for an antique shop or a gift store. Maybe someone there will be able to give me some information about these bottles, and maybe we can locate one. That's the plan. I'll check in with you guys shortly. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what I'm talking about, let's look at kind of where this began. So we're going to look at an article from Tesla Universe, and it's by Leland Anderson, who is clearly the most foremost Nikola Tesla historian. He's the author of so many books and just a wealth of information about Tesla that he obtained by research and investigation. And we would know much less about Tesla without the efforts that he made. So we're going to look at this article, and this is from Electric Spacecraft Journal, a publication by Charles Yost. But we're going to step down to the pertinent information, and that is the condenser in the primary circuit. Tesla had a bank of capacitors there at that lab that was actually what Richard Hull coins as an equidrive circuit, where he had equal sized and equal shaped, and Tesla was really fanatical about balance. And these tanks he had duplicated on either side of the Tesla coil there in the Colorado Springs lab. And those tanks, I think there were 9 on each side. Don't hold me to that. Tesla had interconnects. You can see a sort of switchboard-like device on top of the capacitors, and it's my belief and understanding that those were kind of almost like a switchboard for an old operator at a telephone station, where she would connect one party to another. And what Tesla was doing there was interconnecting the bottles that were inside the tanks. And he could adjust his capacitance through some range based on those interconnects. Now, what's important about the bottles? Let's go to Leland's article and see what he has to say here. So the condenser may seem simple enough as long as it can withstand the excitation voltage plus the resonant voltage rise in the primary circuit. At his experimental station in Colorado Springs, Tesla took the construction of his condenser banks to a higher refinement level. As most will recall from his earlier writings, air bubbles and high-frequency, high-voltage equipment must be completely avoided. The condenser banks at his experimental station consisted of tanks filled with brine and empty mineral water bottles set in the tanks with brine inside. Thus, the conducting brine solution was in intimate contact with the dielectric surface of the bottles. These bottles were not the common types one finds today. Most common bottles have green cast, indicating iron in the glass, but Tesla used bottles with potash content glass, clear and having no color cast, that he obtained from famed mineral water springs dealers in Manitou Springs, misspelled as Manitou Springs in Tesla's Colorado Springs notes. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I think Mr. Anderson was slightly incorrect here. And I didn't know this at first. So this is kind of a mystery that I'm unraveling all at once for you right now. But this has taken me years to kind of put together. So I'm going to take you to another portion of the video that I shot in 2017. And we'll come back and continue the story.
Hey guys, Cameron Prince, Tesla Universe, and as you know, I am in Manitou Springs on the quest to find Tesla's bottle. Now, we started out at the bottling plant. We saw where some old structures were there that may have been there when Tesla was here. We saw the springs where the water came from. We went downtown and went to the shops there, talked to the shopkeepers, went to antique stores, followed up every lead, went to the flea market, searched vendor after vendor, went to the Broadmoor Hotel where we saw Mr. Penrose's collections of thousands of antique bottles. I mean, we have scoured this town, and so far there's no bottle. But I'm not giving up. I mean, the one place that may have a bottle is called the Heritage Center. It's across the street from me, but it runs on a volunteer basis, and so far there's been no volunteers. Now, we went to the Chamber of Commerce and we spoke to them, and they put us in touch with a person who's going to hopefully be here shortly. If we have time, we're going to wait for this guy and see if they have bottles. He did mention that he has bottles, but he thought that they were newer than the ones that Tesla would have used. So I'm not giving up. We're going to find this bottle one way or the other. We know what it looks like. We know, of course, the importance of it. And we're going to find it.
Okay, so now you see the kind of links that I went to locate this bottle. And I'm sure you're wondering, is it really that important? Well, Tesla thought so. Now, I've got my copy of the notes here, and these little tabs you see sticking up, these are the significant mentions of the bottle within the diary. Not the only mentions, but specifically those that relate to Manitou Springs. Now, Tesla was experimenting with 4 different types of bottles. He started out originally, we are looking at July 29th of 1899. And this is the first significant mention of bottles. And he is first trying Bethesda mineral water bottles. And he says these are inadequate to stand the strain beyond 15,000 volts. So these initial bottles that he was working with weren't up to the task. So he is in his own search of bottles. And we see that if we jump ahead here to July 31st, this is Tesla's first mention of Manitou Springs. Now, in the notes, Manitou is misspelled Maniton. Not clear if that was mistranslation by the museum staff or if Tesla recorded it incorrectly himself. Not really sure there. But Tesla begins experimenting with the Manitou bottles, and he's making measurements here, the bottle dimensions, and he also compares it with the third bottle that we see. Speaking of the Vichy bottle, he says it's unnecessarily thick. And he's going back to the Manitou bottles, and he says the conclusion was that 2 sets of the bottles in series would withstand quite safely at least 30,000 volts. The glass is really excellent. So that's his thoughts on the Manitou Springs bottles. So if we jump ahead and keep looking. Now, keep in mind that Tesla used bottles for 2 purposes within the Colorado Springs lab. The first was, of course, in the capacitor bank, but Tesla also used the bottles as glass insulators. He mentions, and we're going to get to this in a future episode when we start focusing on the tower, but I'll summarize it as Tesla wrapped the tower with bottles and then provided a connection to the guy wires, and the structure that tied off the guy wires was insulated from the pole by the bottles. But like I said, we'll come back to that. So those bottles in the tower were champagne bottles. Tesla also tested the champagne bottles as capacitors and compared those with the Manitou bottles. And that's what we see him doing here on August 2nd of 1899. Now, what's funny is Tesla actually goes to theorize or imply that the manufacturers of the champagne bottles purposely hollowed them out to deceive customers. And what he means there is put less product or less volume in the bottle by concaving the bottom. So he ruled those bottles out for the capacitor because the hollow bottoms would trap air, and air is not good in a saltwater capacitor. So they were relegated to become pole insulators. Now let's go to not the final mention of glass or bottles within the notes, but the last significant one, and the one that is going to bring us back to those who are on the edge of their seat saying or thinking to themselves, he said Leland was mistaken. And I'm sorry, but I look, you guys know I'm all about the facts, and I'm pointing these things out to you. I'm not making them up. You'll see. So with that in mind, let's step back over to the article that we read earlier, and I'll highlight here. If we go back to that first paragraph, Leland says most common bottles have green cast indicating iron in the glass, but Tesla used bottles with potash content glass, clear and having no color cast. Okay, yeah, yes, that is an absolute true statement, but that was not the only bottles that Tesla used. And Tesla doesn't go into detail about which color or style of glass was used for particular brands that he mentioned. He doesn't link them up. But what he is saying here on August 11th, and he is talking about, okay, the heading of this entry is measurement of capacity of the new condensers prepared from Manitou water bottles. And the notes say, with the exception of 3 tanks in which bottles with green glass were used, all the remaining bottles were of dark glass. So Tesla had 3 tanks of green glass, and the rest were dark. So I don't know exactly where the disconnect came in. Leland, I'm absolutely positive, did not say this intentionally. I'm sure he just did not remember reading this, which I'm sure he did. And I didn't remember it either until I caught it researching for this article. Like I told you, this is kind of a mystery that's unraveling before my eyes. So now with this in mind, we're going to go to another mystery in our third portion of the 2017 video I recorded. Let's check that out now.
Hey guys, Cameron Prince, Tesla Universe, and today I am at Manitou Springs Heritage Center, and we're on the quest to find the bottle, Tesla's bottle. And I've met this nice gentleman. He works here at the Heritage Center, and I think he's got some good news for us. So, sir, introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Cameron. My name is Michael Mayo. I'm with the Manitou Springs Heritage Center, and we're here today at one of our featured exhibits at the Heritage Center. We call this Bottles and Bottling Plants. Not many people realize it, but Manitou Springs, Colorado, which is a town of about 5,000 people, was one of the major manufacturers of both mineral water bottles and the production of mineral water. Its water was known worldwide and was distributed not only in this country, but at the finest dining tables in Paris, France. We have 2 bottling plants here, we had at one time 2 bottling plants located in Manitou Springs. One was the Manitou Mineral Water Company, while the other one was the Chief Bottling Company. Now, if we step over here, I can tell you a little bit more about the beginnings of the history of this industry here in Manitou Springs. Manitou's mineral water industry was started roughly around 1873, maybe a year or 2 after its founding. The center of town here had several mineral springs, and the trick here was try to capture those mineral waters and bottle them up and bottle them for sale. And so we had, here is the first bottling plant known as the Manitou Mineral Water Company, and it started out with appears to be a shack. It developed from that point, however, after several years, the Manitou Springs Mineral Water Company developed into an enormous plant that we can see right behind us here. This is what it looked like roughly in the early 1900s. This structure here was built at a cost of $25,800.
So if Tesla bought bottles, he would have most likely bought them there.
Well, no, because this plant was constructed in 1890, so he might have bought his bottles from this particular facility.
Yeah, he was here in 1899 through 1900. So that seems about right timeline-wise. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like we've got a gap. These bottles are from the 1890s. These are from 1912. So it seems like we're out of range to find Tesla's bottle.
Well, we also have bottles that were manufactured in the interim, and this would be these bottles here.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's very possible that these bottles here were around the same time, were manufactured around the same time that Tesla was here in Manitou Springs.
But, Mike has a bottle here, and based on what we're seeing and learning, this may actually be the bottle that Tesla used. It's a champagne bottle. It's Manitou Springs. I mean, it's glass. It's
Well, it's not, yes, and yeah, Cameron, just to give you a greater description of this bottle is roughly 12 inches high, and it's vintage 1890, maybe the early 1900s. It reads Manitou Springs Ginger Champagne, which was a very popular blend of mineral water here in Manitou Springs. This would have been the water that was distributed worldwide. And it was manufactured right here in Manitou Springs. This was a very old bottle. It may have been hand blown at one time. It's embossed with the name on it. And a lot of times these bottles, older bottles, had a crown on the top, which is kind of what we see here. They're very grainy looking, as you can see. Many times they were tinted with different colors. This one just happens to be a light green. I've seen other bottles here in our exhibit that are brown and purple. So this is probably pretty close to the real thing.
okay. Well, this is certainly the closest we've found, and maybe he'll let me touch it. Can I touch the bottle?
You may touch it, Cameron.
Look at that.
There you go.
So I may actually be holding one of the bottles like Tesla used in Colorado Springs. Isn't that amazing? We found one. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure meeting you and hearing about the history behind these bottles. And, you know, guys have a great exhibit. So, you know, you guys, if you're ever in Manitou Springs, come on and check this place out.
Okay, so that's probably way more than you wanted to know about Manitou Springs water bottles. But as you can see there, the timeline matched up. Mike tells us that labels were not printed on the bottles until the 1914 era, which we know was 14 years after Tesla was there. But here again, we've got a mystery because let's look at another article. This article is from the Colorado Springs Free Press from May 26th of 1966. This article is the induction of the Tesla marker there in Colorado Springs in the park. And to kind of honor that moment, the town, the politicians, the mayor. I think there were some celebrities that attended this as well. They were invited back to the El Paso Club. And for those who don't know, the El Paso Club, they were the first to welcome Tesla when he arrived there in 1899. They had a banquet for his arrival, and this event honoring the marker placement recreated that event. And I'm going to link these articles obviously in the video description, but the important detail here I want to show you is Every detail was planned to recreate the atmosphere of the original Tesla dinner. Table decorations of red and white carnations were blended with white doves. Antique Manitou water bottles with corks and old labels describing curative powers of the contents were secured from the Manitou Beverage Company to duplicate the custom of serving Manitou water on all first-class hotel tables in 1899. Okay, so Mike indicates that the label was not added until 1914. But this article indicates that these bottles duplicated the custom of serving Manitou. So, and they recreated the atmosphere with every detail. So, was the bottle really embossed, or did it have a label? So now I'm going to bring you back from the Wayback Machine to today. And if you recall, I think it was the first or second podcast, I mentioned that I located an artifact that I had been searching for years. Well, I am proud to show you this Manitou Springs bottle. Now, it's a really interesting story. I was in Colorado Springs for work a month or so back, 6 weeks ago, and we were just having fun. My girlfriend came, and I asked her if she wanted to go to Colorado Springs. We were in Denver, and she said, sure. I had a grandparent there, and she wanted to visit that house where her grandparents lived. So we did that, and of course, I wanted to take her to Manitou Springs. One of my favorite places to go is Paris Crepes, and I wanted, was looking forward to showing her around. And while we were on the way in between Denver and Colorado Springs, we were driving, and I was telling her the story of the water bottle and how I had made these videos and this search that I wasn't quite convinced of, because I recorded the videos and then I read this article about the labels, so I was not 100% convinced that what I had learned was accurate. So of course she was very interested in the story, and we talked about it for a while, and then we got into town, and we stopped by her grandparents' house, and she collected a pine cone from a pine tree that had been there since she was a child. And my girlfriend's very artistic. She felt this compulsion to draw this pine cone, and she wanted me to stop and buy her a pad. She wanted to buy a pencil and a notebook. And, at the moment, I really thought that she would start thinking about something else and forget that, because I didn't know where to get a notebook in Manitou Springs. I mean, there's not like a Walmart there. So we kept going, and we're getting into downtown. I was showing her the Penny Arcade, and she brings up this, I really want a notepad. And kind of incessant about it. And finally, I said, okay, I turned, we went up the street and turned around and come back, and there's a general store there on the corner. And I said, well, do you want to go in there and look for a notebook? And she said, sure. So I wheeled around where I saw an open parking spot, but then I noticed it said no parking. So I'm like, well, all right, I'll wait in the car here, and you go in and get the notebook. Well, a few minutes later, she's calling me, and she says, hey, I really think you need to come in. I think that there may be something here you'd like to see. So I said, well, what about the parking? I can't really go in because I don't want to leave the rental car parked in a no parking zone. And the owner, I hear him talking to her on speaker through the speakerphone, and he asks what spot I'm in, and he tells me it's okay. So I go in, and she says, "Remember the water bottle you were telling me about?" And she took me back and showed me this bottle. And sure enough, it is a green glass. You can see it's got color to it. It's definitely not clear. This is a green glass bottle. It's a Manitou Springs bottle. It's printed right here, and it has the label that talks about halative powers. So there you have it. The story of Nikola Tesla and the Manitou Springs mineral water bottle. More than you probably ever wanted to know, but now you know. It was super fun. I really am glad to kind of come full circle with that. Now, do we know for certain this is the type of bottle that Tesla used at Colorado Springs? No, we can't be certain. No one can, but it matches. So, for those of you curious about the Charlotte Muzar interview, that will return next week. This is a pretty long one, so I'm going to call it quits now. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time and attention. We'll see you next time.